So, we really need to talk about Monday.
Yeah, Monday's a big one.
Specifically this coming Monday in Brittany. There's a speech happening at the El Long submarine base that is, well, arguably the most high-stakes routine address in modern European history.
Oh, it's definitely the one everyone is losing sleep over right now. And you're totally right to use the word routine in air quotes there.
Right, because technically it is routine.
Exactly. I mean, technically, French presidents do this once per term. It's a nuclear policy review. Usually it's super dry, it's administrative, it's just about budget lines for 2035.
But the context right now, I mean, we're in February 2026. That context makes this completely different.
100%.
We aren't just talking about budget lines anymore. We're talking about survival.
Yes.
Because if you just look at the map for a second, Russian aggression in the east hasn't let up at all.
No, it hasn't.
And then you look west across the Atlantic, and you have Donald Trump back in the White House. And the credibility of the American security guarantee is, well, let's just call it uncertain.
Uncertain is a very polite diplomatic word for it. The panic is very real.
Yeah.
For 70 years, Europe's defense strategy was basically, call Washington.
Right, pick up the phone.
Exactly. But now, with that line potentially disconnected, or at least highly unreliable, every single head of state in Europe is swiveling their chairs toward Paris.
Because France is the last man standing.
They are.
Ever since Brexit, they're the only nuclear power left in the EU.
Yeah.
So this speech at the submarine base isn't just Macron updating some dusty manual.
Far right.
It's basically the entire continent looking at him and asking, if the worst happens, will you save us?
And that is exactly the billion-euro question we're digging into today.
Exactly. So for you listening, the mission of this deep dive today is to really parse through all this frantic diplomacy that's been leading up to this speech.
There's been a lot of it.
A ton. We're going to analyze the new demands from neighbors like Germany and the Nordic countries.
And then we have to hit the hard wall of reality.
Oh, the hardware wall.
Right, because when you look at the actual French nuclear doctrine and the actual nuts and bolts, the hardware they have to back it up, the so-called European nuclear umbrella, isn't quite the ironclad shield people are hoping it is.
It really feels like we're watching a geopolitical version of musical chairs.
That's a good way to put it.
And the music just stopped. Everyone is scrambling for a seat. There's only one chair left, and it literally has the French flag painted on it.
Yeah.
Let's actually start with the location itself, because El Long isn't just an accidental choice of venue. It's highly symbolic.
It's the sanctuary. El Long is the home port for the French Triumphant-class ballistic missile submarines.
The big ones.
The massive ones. In French military doctrine, this is the ultimate insurance policy. If you see the president standing there, he is visually reminding the whole world of their second strike capability.
Which means, even if you hit us first.
Right. The message is, even if you wipe us off the map completely, we can still erase you from under the ocean.
Wow. Which perfectly tees up this massive diplomatic flurry we saw in mid-February.
Yes, the Munich Security Conference.
Right. Usually, nuclear talks are kept totally in the shadows, very hush-hush, very back-channel. But looking at our sources from Munich, the quiet part is being said out loud now.
Very loudly. And honestly, the loudest voice in the room was German Chancellor Friedrich Merz.
Which is just a massive historical shift. I mean, Germany discussing nuclear weapons.
It's huge.
That has been the ultimate political taboo in Berlin since 1945.
Exactly. For decades, Germany was perfectly comfortable living under the U.S. umbrella.
They hosted American weapons, right?
They did. They hosted American gravity bombs. But the strategic ownership, the final say, was always American.
Okay.
Now, though, you have Chancellor Merz initiating what he called preliminary talks with Macron.
Right.
And he is explicitly asking for a, quote, European nuclear deterrence framework.
That phrase, deterrence framework, feels like it's doing a lot of heavy lifting. What does he actually want? Like, is he asking to buy French nukes?
No, he's asking for coverage.
Okay.
He's exploring whether France and the UK, to be fair, though obviously they are outside the EU structure now, whether they can be elevated to the same level as the U.S. nuclear umbrella.
So he essentially wants to know if an attack on Berlin would trigger a launch from a French submarine, just as surely as an attack on Paris would.
Precisely.
He basically wants Article 5, but with a French accent.
That is exactly it. But look, it's not just the Germans. The research planet we went through highlighted something that I honestly found even more surprising.
The Nordic countries.
Yes, the northern flank.
We usually think of Scandinavia as the absolute bastion of disarmament and peace treaties, But the rhetoric coming out of Denmark and Sweden recently has been incredibly hawkish.
Well, geography is destiny, as they say.
Right, they are right on the front line.
They are. The comments from the Danish trade minister, Rasmus Jarlov, were pretty startling. He basically told the AP that Scandinavian nations absolutely have the resources to build their own nuclear weapons eventually.
That's a capability claim. It almost sounds like a threat. Like, hey, we could do it if we had to.
It is a signal. It's a signal to Russia, obviously, but it's also a major signal to their allies. It's saying, we are taking this current threat so seriously that we are literally reconsidering our historical non-proliferation stance.
Right.
But then Jarlov pivoted in that same interview. He said that while they could do it, quote, in the short term, our focus is on France.
So it's like, we won't build our own bomb just yet, provided Paris steps up and covers us?
Correct. And we know from the sources that Sweden has been in confirmed talks as well.
So you have this massive convergence right now.
You really do.
The Germans want a framework, the Nordics want assurance, and literally everyone is looking at Macron to expand his so-called vital interests to cover the entire European continent.
Vital interests. That is the critical phrase here.
That's the key legal term in French nuclear doctrine, isn't it?
Yes. The president can order a nuclear strike specifically when France's vital interests are threatened.
And historically, France has been very careful to never actually define exactly where those interests end.
Right. Does it stop at the Rhine River? Does it include Berlin? Warsaw? They don't say.
Which leads us perfectly into the red line section of our notes today. Because if I'm Chancellor Merz, and I'm literally banking my entire country's survival on French missiles, I probably want a seat at the table.
Naturally.
I want to know the criteria. I want some level of control.
And that is exactly where Macron is going to firmly shut the door this Monday.
Really?
Yeah, the reporting from Reuters is completely definitive on this. Macron is expected to explicitly rule out any shared European control.
So no European Nuclear Committee. No shared button whatsoever.
Absolutely not. The launch authority rests solely 100% with the French president.
Okay.
There is no dual key arrangement like the Germans have currently with the U.S.
Wait, remind us how the dual key works with the U.S.?
So in the U.S.-German model, the U.S. provides the bomb and the Germans provide the plane to drop it. They both have to turn the key, essentially. But in the French model, it's French bombs, French planes, French decision, end of story.
I assume the core French argument here is that decision-making by a giant committee just doesn't work in a fast-paced nuclear war.
That's the primary strategic argument, yes. Deterrence relies entirely on speed and certainty.
Right.
If an adversary knows you have to, say, call an emergency meeting of 27 EU member states, debate the motion, and then take a vote before launching.
The deterrent is totally worthless.
Exactly. The war is over before everyone even logs on to the Zoom call.
But there's a nationalistic angle to this too, surely.
Oh, a massive one. French officials term this funding a national obligation.
You mean?
Meaning they aren't asking the Germans or anyone else to pay for the maintenance of the warheads, which implies they aren't selling shares in the company either. It keeps France's sovereignty absolute and unquestioned.
This brings us to a concept we saw a lot in the source material strategic ambiguity.
Yes, a very important term.
We hear this thrown around constantly by officials. To a layperson, it honestly sounds like a polite way of saying, we have absolutely no idea what we're doing.
It does sound like that.
But in nuclear theory, it's actually a specific weapon, right?
It is. It's basically the uncertainty principle applied to global warfare.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you draw a bright, distinct red line, say you announce, we will drop a nuke on you if your tanks cross the Vistula River, then you effectively just told the enemy they are completely safe to do whatever they want, right up until they hit that specific river.
Oh, I see. You essentially invite aggression right up to the exact limit you set.
Exactly. So by actively not defining the line, you force the enemy to be cautious everywhere.
They don't know what might trigger the end of the world.
Right. Analysts expect Macron to really double down on this ambiguity on Monday.
So he's definitely not going to stand up and say, I will protect Estonia.
Highly unlikely. Instead, he'll say something much more carefully worded, like, France's vital interests have an inseparable European dimension.
Which sounds really nice in a grand speech. It allows everyone in the room to project their own hopes onto it.
Exactly.
The Estonians hear, great, he's got our back. And the French public hears, don't worry, we're still totally in charge.
It's politically brilliant. But this is exactly where we have to stop looking at the soaring rhetoric and start looking at the actual physics.
The reality check part of the deep dive.
Yes. Because even if Macron genuinely wants to cover all of Europe, there is a massive hardware problem that really doesn't get discussed enough in the mainstream press.
You're talking about the delivery systems.
Right. Let's look at what France actually has in the arsenal right now.
Okay.
They have the submarine-launched ballistic missiles, the SLBMs, specifically the M51s.
These are the ones on the subs at Aolong.
Yes. Now, these are absolute doomsday weapons. They are designed to flatten major cities in massive retaliation for a direct strike on France.
Right.
But they aren't really flexible tools for defending an ally in a limited tactical conflict.
So they can't just fire a warning shot with a submarine missile. What about the other leg of their triad?
Well, France only has a dyad now. Submarines and the airborne leg.
Ah, right.
The airborne leg relies on the Rafale fighter jets carrying the ASMPA missile. And this is where the geometry gets really tricky for Europe.
Range.
Exactly. The ASMPA is a truly terrifying weapon, but it has a maximum range of about 500 kilometers.
Just 500 kilometers. That's not far at all.
No. In the scale of continental warfare, it's incredibly short.
Right. If you look at a map, 500 kilometers barely gets you across the border.
Exactly. If you launch a Rafale jet from a base in central France, that missile absolutely cannot reach the Russian heartland.
Wow.
It can barely reach the front lines of a hypothetical conflict in Eastern Europe without the jet having to fly deep, deep into hostile, contested territory.
Whereas the U.S. nuclear umbrella, the one Europe is used to, that relies on ICBMs that can hit literally anywhere on Earth, or stealth bombers with massive intercontinental range.
Exactly. The scale is completely different. To make the French airborne deterrent actually credible for protecting, say, Finland or Poland, you would theoretically need to forward deploy French nuclear-armed jets to bases inside those countries.
Oh, boy. Which triggers a whole new set of massive problems.
Huge problems. First of all, it technically violates the Russia-NATO Founding Act.
Though some analysts would argue that agreement is already dead in the water.
True, but more importantly, forward deployment totally dilutes that strict French control we just spent 10 minutes talking about.
Right, because if French nukes are sitting in a physical hangar in Poland, the Polish government is inherently involved.
The security is shared, the airspace is shared, it gets incredibly messy.
What about tactical nukes? The smaller battlefield stuff we always hear about Russia having.
Good question. France doesn't really do tactical nukes in the way Russia or the U.S. might.
They don't.
Not really. Their doctrine calls for what they term a final warning shot.
A final warning shot.
Yeah, a single limited strike to instantly restore deterrence and say back off. But they don't have a vast arsenal of small-yield artillery shells or nuclear landmines.
So they couldn't just use a small one to stop a tank battalion.
No, and developing all of those smaller weapons would take years and billions of euros, and it would seriously run afoul of the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
So Merz and the Nordic leaders are essentially asking for a shield to cover them, but the French umbrella is physically too small to even cover the whole patio.
That is the harsh reality check of 2026. And we haven't even touched on the political friction with NATO yet.
Oh, right. We cannot ignore Mark Rutte's comments from the sources. This was back in January.
In NATO Secretary General.
Yes. He wasn't exactly cheering on the sidelines for this new European autonomy, was he?
Far from it. He issued a pretty stark warning to the European Parliament. He basically said, look, stop trying to reinvent the wheel here.
Because of the cost.
Primarily, yes. He warned that building an independent capability is going to cost, and I quote, billions and billions of euros.
Money that Europe doesn't really have sitting around. Or rather, money that urgently needs to go to basic things like tanks, artillery ammunition, and air defense.
That's the classic opportunity cost problem. If France or Germany suddenly pours billions into a brand new nuclear program, that money comes straight out of the budget for conventional ground forces.
And right now, Europe desperately needs conventional forces to deter a conventional ground war.
Exactly. Plus, Rope brought up the risk of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Explain that.
His argument is that if Europe actively builds its own independent nuclear structure, it hands the isolationists in Washington the absolutely perfect excuse to leave.
They can just say, great, you guys have clearly got this handled, we're leaving.
Exactly. It could dramatically accelerate the exact U.S. decoupling that everyone in Europe is frantically trying to avoid.
It's a total paradox.
It really is. You build independent defenses because you fear the U.S. is leaving, but by building them, you make it politically easier for the U.S. to actually leave.
Wow. So France seems to be trying to thread a very, very tiny needle here.
They are.
They are telling Washington, hey, we aren't replacing you, we're just complementing you.
Mm.
And they're telling Berlin, we will definitely protect you, but you absolutely cannot touch the controls.
Right.
And they're telling Moscow, don't test us, because we just might be crazy enough to push the button.
It's a massive balancing act that relies almost entirely on credibility. And credibility, especially in nuclear physics and global politics, is a very fragile thing.
Which brings us right back to this upcoming Monday. We have incredibly high expectations, we have frantic neighbors knocking on the door, and we have a doctrine built on intentional ambiguity.
Yes.
What happens if the ambiguity simply isn't enough anymore?
That is the primary worry keeping analysts awake. I think Heloise Fay really summed it up best in the source materials.
Remind us who she is.
She's a prominent researcher at the French Institute of International Relations. She noted that there are extremely high expectations on the part of allies and partners, but, quote, perhaps also adversaries.
Perhaps also adversaries. That is the chilling part.
It really is, because you have to assume Moscow is going to be watching this speech at Elong just as closely as Berlin is.
Oh, absolutely.
They are actively analyzing the French doctrine, looking for cracks. They want to know, is this European dimension actually real? Or is it just pretty words?
Because if Putin truly believes that France would never actually trade Paris for Warsaw...
Right. If he thinks they wouldn't actually risk total nuclear annihilation just to save a Polish city, then the entire deterrent fails.
And the hardware gap we talked about, that 500-kilometer range limit on the airborne missiles, that is a pretty visible physical crack in the armor.
It is.
It's really hard to successfully bluff when your sword is physically too short to actually reach the enemy.
Exactly. It forces the adversary to start calculating the odds. And history shows us that when nuclear deterrence turns into a mere calculation of odds, rather than an absolute guarantee of mutual destruction, the world becomes a much, much more dangerous place.
It's a deeply sobering reality.
It is.
Because what this deep dive today really suggests is that while the diplomatic will might be there, I mean, clearly Europe desperately wants to defend itself, the logistics and the actual strategic doctrine just haven't caught up to the fear yet.
No, they haven't. We are living through a very dangerous transition period right now.
Stuck in the middle.
Exactly. A transition between the old, comfortable world of American security guarantees and a new world of true European autonomy that just doesn't quite exist yet in practice.
So before we wrap up today, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to really chew on.
Let's hear it.
We talked earlier about the Danish minister saying their short-term focus is squarely on France.
Right.
But based on everything we've just established, France is flatly ruling out shared control and arguably lacks the long-range hardware capacity to actually cover the whole continent anyway.
The massive gap between the political primus and the military reality.
Exactly. So the question you have to ask yourself is this new European nuclear umbrella actually a shield? Or is it just a symbol? Just a flag waving in the wind to make everyone feel a little bit better at night?
That's the real issue.
And perhaps more importantly, if we can clearly see the holes in this umbrella from where we are sitting, surely the adversaries watching closely from the east can see them too.
Without a doubt.
So when they look at this new French posture, do they see a terrifying deterrent or do they see an opportunity?
That is exactly the question that will determine the entire next decade of European history.
Keep your eyes on Brittany this Monday. The wind won't be the only thing blustering.
Go.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.